All right, cheers and salutations. Welcome one and all to Americans Learn. My name is Kit. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And that way, all of you lovely, beautiful people are made aware. That's right, when we upload new content upon our YouTube channel. And today, we got ourselves a sequel. I'm enjoying some hot cocoa this time around because we're checking out part 2 of the Turkish century from Hittites to Atatürk. I'm probably saying that wrong, but as always, folks, Kraut is the original content creator. So please, folks, for all the videos we check out here for Americans Learn, please support the original content creator. It's the right thing to do. It's the one thing to do. And I expect all you beautiful, lovely people to do that. But also, I want to just make very clear here. I joked about, the name Constantinople. I'm only playing that on for me checking out the unbiased history of ancient Rome. So, it's all a little bit light humor and jokes. All in all, 10 out of 10. This is a very informative YouTube video, and we're going to check out a second part of it. We're going to break this video into 3 parts. So, as always, check out the full video in its full entirety. The original link, again, description box below. And let's go ahead and check this video out. But before we do, remember, Constantinople, as we should, as we always should. Remember it. It is in our souls. It is in our hearts. Now let's have some hot cocoa and check this video out in a 3, a 2, and an uno.
For one, and probably most importantly, there's a big difference between being tolerated and having rights as a person. The main difference being that one of them is a long list of guarantees to you as a person for your safety, life, and well-being. The other
Very good.
is a list of all the things you cannot do, mostly dictated by a majority to a oppressed minority. The tolerance under the Ottomans, from our modern lens, was preferable to the intolerance of its neighbors, but it was just that, a condescending tolerance. Under Sharia law, a non-Muslim is a lesser being. A non-Muslim pays special taxes, has no access to legal protections that Muslims may have. His testimony against a Muslim will always be rejected in courts, which by extension means Muslims have a free hand to commit crimes against non-Muslims without facing any consequences. Non-Muslims are forbidden from owning a means of transportation, are forbidden from building new houses of worship, were forbidden from publicly practicing their faith, and lived in segregated ghettos. From our modern lens, this is unacceptable, but even this discriminatory standard of living was preferable over the chaos and
Yeah, Europe. Hey, Europe. You're kind of, sort of, maybe a little bit out of pocket, especially with all those. We found a witch. Mary burn her.
madness of Europe at the time, where worshipping the wrong god simply got you burned alive. If you were to travel back through time into the Ottoman Empire at the height of its power, calling the first official you encountered a Turk or even an Ottoman would have earned you a weird look and the response, "You are in the Roman Empire," as that is what the empire.
Oh, how dare you stand where he once stood? You oh, so you're the Roman Empire, eh? Well, then I'm Aurelian reborn. Sir, how dare you?
Saw itself as. After taking Constantinople, they
While it looks like he's smiling, why are you smiling at his grave, sir? What do you have to smile about? There should be warnings ahead. Hey, horrific image. R.I.P. to Byzantium. You will be avenged.
Claimed themselves to be the legitimate heirs of the Roman Empire. This was also a society of multiple languages, from Turkish to Persian to Arabic to Armenian, Greek and Hebrew. And languages were also separated by class, not only within the Islamic religious hierarchy, but by social status. Few people outside of the Ottoman Arab lands spoke Arabic. The language was reserved to be the language of religion and the mosque. The commoners spoke Turkish, but the Sultan, the royal family and the royal court all spoke Persian, as they had held on to the court traditions and practices of the Seljuks, and also saw themselves as the legitimate rulers of Iran. Which leads us to another often overlooked fact. We like to often think of the Ottomans as the great rivals of Russia or the Habsburgs, but the reality is that they mostly fought their wars with dynasties ruling Iran, as they wished to incorporate Iran into their empire. The Ottoman transformation period lasted for 2 centuries, throughout which it was at the height of its reach and the predominant power of the hemisphere. But as we all know, that empire came to gradually, over the course of its remaining 2 centuries, to collapse into itself. It is often somewhat hard to deduct and find the reason for why an empire collapses. First and foremost, it is something that is, in our day and age, very easily exploited.
We is like Rome. We is like Rome. No, you're not. No, we are not. Okay? There was only one Rome. There was a dream of Rome. And it can never be remade again.
For very cheap political nonsense shots. The Roman Empire is a great example of this. I am sure cheap political nonsense shots. The Roman Empire.
There should be imagery, like wording like, hey, heads up, something horrific. My one gripe was this video. The RIP Byzantium and now this.
Empire is a great example of this. I am sure many of you have seen that Michael Moore movie, where he draws comparisons between the supposed decadence of the late Roman Empire and the United States.
Michael Moore is overrated, okay? He's mediocre. He needs to get over himself.
Or some drooling right-wing YouTuber claiming immigration caused the Roman Empire to collapse. However, when the Roman Empire collapsed,
Aurelian, where are you at?
It was at the height of Christianity's power in the empire, when most of the things we consider to be decadent had been abolished, and the Romans purposefully sought out the conquest and settling of foreign peoples who they could then use as a resource. The list of reasons for why this empire collapsed is immensely long, and many of these
Invasion of West by Theodosius, bankruptcy, Mediterranean piracy, collapse. Okay, here's what led to the fall of the Roman Empire, okay? Evil Germanic Huns, wizards using dark sorcery, the vengeful spirit of Cleopatra, and no longer using true Roman grain to make true Roman bread. There. That's what caused it. And a few other things.
Reasons are often overlooked by hacks who seek to make cheap political points. By the 3rd century, the wealthiest Romans had basically stopped paying taxes, which
You care about the Roman Empire? Nah.
Made paying large armies to patrol the borders close to impossible. There is the in a previous chapter mentioned recurve bow, the fact that the Romans offered the Goths lands as vassals in exchange for an alliance against the Huns, and after defeating the Huns, betrayed that promise.
From a certain point of view, okay, you can't trust the Goths. The Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, any kind of Goths, so there you go.
To which the Goths reacted by pillaging Roman lands.
Yeah, see, and they were wrong to do that.
The fact that the Eastern Roman Emperor Theodosius invaded and sacked the West because it tolerated non-Christians and even appointed them as senators, a war from which the West barely recovered. This leads us to one of the most overlooked reasons, the increasing fanaticism of the Roman Christian churches, which in the final century of Rome's existence persecuted non-Christians and made such incredibly wise decisions as declaring bathing, and by that extent personal hygiene, to be a satanic ritual.
Feeling itchy all over. Come on. Come on. Why? Why?
Gee, I wonder where all those late...
Ew. Oh, good Lord. Oh, good lord. Oh, good lord, no.
Roman plagues came from. In summary, there's a long list of reasons for why some nations fail, and some of these reasons are unfortunately easily abused, and others easily overlooked. History is never simple, and the reason for why historic events happen are also often never simple. When it comes to the Ottoman Empire in popular history, the moment mostly used as the supposed beginning of the decline is the failed siege of Vienna. But that is really not the moment
Not Vienna sausage.
to realistically choose. This was an extraordinary event, one of the few moments where European states that usually were enemies were able to unite in a common cause. So it makes for a nice story, something that sounds nice and appeals to visions that people may have of the past and present as civilizational struggles between vague concepts of cultures. But it leaves out a fundamental fact, which is that even after this defeat, the Ottoman Empire was still at the peak of its strength and would remain a powerhouse for almost 2 more centuries. Let me instead posit to you 3 alternative reasons for why the Ottoman Empire declined: technological, geographic, and social. The compass, the cross-staff, and the carvel. The compass helped you know where you were going. The cross-staff helped you figure out where you are. And the carvel was a way to build a ship that allowed it to go faster, with more cargo, and deep into the oceans. Suddenly, those vast pits of certain doom and death turned into free highways, and those highways led to new lands, which in their turn brought something new to Europe.
Hey,
The potato, the tomato, and corn.
I'm actually growing some tomatoes. I'm going to have a whole treasure trove of tomatoes and have a lot of BLTs. Bacon, lettuce, tomato sandwiches. Lots of them.
These new cash crops were not as frail and vulnerable as wheat. The Europeans suddenly had their own bread baskets that could sustain a surplus in food, and the technological advances in deep-water navigation also impacted geography, not physically, but its usefulness. If you wanted to buy Chinese silk or Indian spices, you had to pay the tariff set by the Chinese, Mughals, Safavids, Ottomans, and Venetians. These products ended up
That is way too many taxes.
being luxuries due to the resulting large price tag, and the Ottomans controlled that trade route, so a lot of the money went to them. Then the Portuguese simply sailed around Africa and them, cutting out all the middlemen and bringing vast fortunes. The strategic importance of the Mediterranean, which had helped the Ottomans so much, was suddenly a trap. Now they were closed in and limited by that small ocean and couldn't break out into the open oceans. This brings us to a battle and a war which I believe were more significant than the siege of Vienna. For the Ottomans to break out of the Mediterranean, they would have to conquer and control the entire Mediterranean. So
There's only one people who've done it. You know them. You love them. The Romans. Alas, they are now gone forever.
they went to war with Venice, the Papal States, Genoa, and Spain, and were shattered at the Battle of Lepanto, where the recently developed new naval technologies proved their worth. The massive and powerful Ottoman navy that had controlled the Mediterranean for centuries consisted of rowing galleons, meant to board enemy vessels and fight hand to hand. Spain sailed in with cannon-laden sailing galleons that laid waste.
Hold on. Just throwing it out there. This is a work of art. Gotta love the painting. Attention to detail, everything to it. Clearly, and especially in real life, this must have been one horrific battle. But clearly, maybe the artists, whoever they were, must have caught this image of this poor sap jumping or falling into the ocean, you know? It's one of those things like, hey, Johnny, don't stay too close to the railing or you'll fall in. Ah, Bob, I know what I'm doing. And he falls right on in. There probably wasn't a Johnny or a Bob, but, you know, hey, that guy falling into the ocean. Hey, yeah, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here.
To the outdated Ottoman navy. Ottoman dominance of the Mediterranean was thereby broken, and they were restricted to a sphere of influence around the easternmost parts of the Mediterranean. Another path to break out was through the Gulf into trying to dominate and seize control of the Indian Ocean. This resulted in a 20-year war with the Portuguese-Ethiopian alliance, which the Ottomans lost.
Oh.
Trapped by the limitations of their geography and technology, the Ottomans became prisoners of their own empire, unable to expand beyond its limitations. But there's also a social change which contributed to eventually undermining the Ottoman Empire. This is St. Hedwig's Cathedral in Berlin. It's just one of many cathedrals all across many European cities, but this one is somewhat special. Starting construction under Frederick II of Prussia, intent as being a temple for all religions to share as a common house of worship, it would be the first Catholic cathedral in a Protestant land. Gradually, after a few centuries of slaughtering each other over who was worshipping the right god, Europeans realized that this was silly and instead found other silly reasons to slaughter each other. But the extreme religious intolerance that had existed in prior centuries started to gradually wither away. The Ottomans thereby started losing their monopoly on tolerance. In 1774 came a massive hit to the Ottoman prestige when they were defeated by the Russians in war. The Russians annexed Ottoman lands in the Ukraine and the Crimea, but there's an often overlooked part of this war that arguably might have done even more damage. The peace agreement included a clause that assigned and guaranteed to Russia the role of being the protector of Christians within the Ottoman Empire. And by that extent, since the Ottoman Sultan was also the Caliph, Russia was the protector of Christianity in the entire Islamic world. If you were a Christian in the Ottoman Empire, you were suddenly not only able to find the same degree of condescending tolerance abroad, but you now had nations abroad that took a vested supposed interest in your well-being, who stood up for you against your overlord in case said overlord may act capriciously.
And there will never be any kind of revolution or rebellion that would take place within the Ottoman Empire. That would light the fires, would it? The answer may surprise you.
Against you, or at least on the surface. In reality, this clause was more of a crowbar with which Russia could insert itself into Ottoman affairs as a justification for future wars. Nonetheless, this started changing minds. Why should I pay more taxes, be denied equal legal protection, and live my life being constantly degraded as a heretic to a dominant faith? And the final nail in the coffin of the Ottoman social structure came from France, when the French beheaded their king, had somewhat of a revolution, and declared the emancipation of the Jews, with proclaiming that all men were equal, that all had inherent equal rights and liberties no matter their background, ethnicity, faith, or lack thereof. There is a difference between being tolerated and having rights, and with this event, the Ottoman Islamic social structures turned to many into an outdated relic of the past.
And when that happens, history comes in knocking at your door.
When Tsar Peter I of Russia, also known as the Great, died in 1725, he left behind a last will and testament unlike any other Tsars before him. It was meant to be shown not just to his direct successor, but to be read by each and every single Tsar or Tsarina after him the moment they ascended to the throne.
Right.
It wasn't something that he had left behind for them, but a simple instruction. Go and conquer Constantinople. The 1800s...
Get the city back! Save the city! That's awesome. Hey, listen, guys. I'm dying. But go get back Constantinople! Get it back! I love it. Hold on. Rewind that. Say again, Tsar. What do you want us to do?
Like any other Tsars before him. It was meant to be shown not just to his direct successor, but to be read by each and every single Tsar or Tsarina after him the moment they ascended to the throne. It wasn't something that he had left behind for them, but a simple instruction. Go and conquer Constantinople. The 1800s were a century of imperial expansion and nationalist separatism. Powerful states and ideas would equally come down on the Ottomans with intense pressure. And even though they would try to reform and revive their dying empire, they would find themselves unable to avert disaster. The ideas which the French Revolution had spawned of men as equals, a people's right to self-determination, as well as nationalism, came to be the first thing to bite the Ottomans when the Greeks rebelled during their revolution of the 1820s. Foreign interests, however, also played a role in this. The Greeks were initially losing their revolution until foreign powers saw use in a weakened Ottoman Empire and sent their fleets to help the Greeks achieve victory. This was the tipping point. For the first time, a people under Ottoman rule had risen in revolt against its imperial overlords and won their independence. It showed to all the others what was possible. It showed the Europeans that they could expand their influence over the Ottoman Empire by supporting separatism. It showed the Arabs that their overlords were weaker than expected and beatable. Until this moment, the Ottomans might have even still had a chance to turn things around and possibly avoid a total collapse. But from this moment on, it became unavoidable. The Greek Revolution was one of the biggest, if not the biggest nail in the Ottoman coffin. It would form the basis of a new Greek national identity, form the basis of conflict and antagonism that would last to this very day. And from the first Greek day of independence onward, the Ottomans would huddle from one disaster into another. The first to take advantage were the French, who invaded Ottoman Algeria 2 years after Greek independence and made it a colonial province of the French Empire.
Yeah. Oh boy, here's where problems start rising up again. Causing problems.
Also, 2 years after Greek independence, the Egyptians revolted, took Jerusalem and Damascus, and gained great autonomy. The Ottomans had to get the British for help to regain control over the Levant, but the British would only do so in exchange for Cyprus. Both had to recognize Egyptian autonomy, marking the first time in centuries that an Arab nation asserted itself again on the world stage, with a ruler intent on modernizing and building a modern Arab monarchy. However, we don't know how that
I'm already seeing trouble a-brewing.
would have gone, as Britain took advantage of this fledgling little new state by occupying it, and Egypt was thereby forced into another empire. 2 years before the end of the Greek Revolution, the Ottomans, in an attempt to clamp down and gain more control over their European lands, cracked down on the Bektashi Muslims of Albania, which resulted in a decade of continuous Albanian uprisings. In 1931, Bosnian Muslim landlords rebelled against land reform. The uprising was brutally crushed, and in an attempt to solve the problem, the Ottomans split the lands up into new administrative sections, giving some of it to their Serbian vassals, which created new problems that themselves kept continuously creating new problems to this day. The Serbs themselves kept having uprisings, and so did the Macedonians, the Montenegrins, the Bulgarians, and the Greeks, who were still under Ottoman rule. All this turmoil and chaos convinced outsiders that this place was falling apart and up for grabs. It also fell into a time of greater Russian imperial ambitions under a growing nationalist pan-Slavic movement, a movement that dreamed of a greater Slavic empire, who referred to Istanbul not as Constantinople, but as Tsaringrad.
Alright, hey. Constantinople's just fine. You don't need to call it anything else. Same thing with Tsaringrad or whatever. The name is just fine on its own. You know? Byzantium, yes. Okay, very interesting name, a good name. All right. I'll give it a C+. But if you want an A triple plus and infinitum, the second name is the best. Okay? Done by guess who? Constantine the Great. And there's a lot of great things about him. You don't have to rename the city so many times. Second time was good. That was it. That's all you got to do.
A future capital for such an empire, proclaiming that the turmoil was proof that the Ottomans were mistreating their Christians, and referring to the previously mentioned treaty that gave them the role as the guarantor of safety and protector of Christians in the Islamic world. The Russians invaded in 1854 during what became known as the Crimean War, and it seemed like the Ottomans were in for the next big disaster, possibly even the final one. However, the Russians may have been correct about the Ottomans falling apart, but they had gotten greedy, and with their invasion that was clearly aimed at Constantinople, they upset the European balance of powers. Those European nations may have hated each other, but they certainly didn't want a massive, overly powerful Russian empire dominating the Mediterranean and the Balkans. So in the end, the Russians accomplished something completely different, something that was almost impossible a year before, an alliance between the British, the French and the Austrians that forced the Russians out of the Balkans and for good measure also sank the Russian fleet. But the resulting peace agreement exposed how the Ottomans' supposed allies and saviors were in reality just there to snatch bits and pieces for themselves. The British got even more concessions over Cyprus. The French gained the title of protector of Christianity in the Ottoman lands, and they would in the future themselves use it just like the Russians as a crowbar to justify wars. And the Ottomans had to give up even more.
Stay with me, folks. What could possibly go wrong?
More control over Serbia and Romania. By this time, it would take drastic measures to save the empire, which the Ottomans conducted in 1856 by abolishing the Islamic Sharia-based social order, inviting foreigners to help build a new army, restructured the state to have equal direct representation for all ethnic groups, and even built a nice modern palace in European style as they adopted European dress codes. But these changes were mainly cosmetic and didn't have much impact on changing the overall situation, as things continued mostly as usual. Next came a rebellion of Serbs in Herzegovina who had risen up against Bosnian Muslim landlords. The 1860s brought a Greek insurrection in Crete and an uprising of Arabs in Lebanon, and this was followed by the next great disaster. In 1876 the Bulgarians rose up in revolt. Probably sick and tired of it all, the Ottomans made a monumentally stupid and horrible decision. Instead of just putting down the insurrections as they had done so many times before, they sent an army that raped, burnt, robbed, pillaged, slaughtered and massacred its way through Bulgaria. In an attempt to pacify the place by terrorizing its people, tens of thousands of civilians were slaughtered. What this war is most remembered for are the mass beheadings. Every time an Ottoman army would march into a town, city or village, all men aged 14 to
Oh God, my neck is starting to hurt. Why?
50 were gathered together in the town square and beheaded as the town was forced to watch. However, by 1876, newspapers were in wide circulation and had become part of everyone's daily life. Most nations had by then agreed to basic sets of rules of war that forbade the intentional slaughter of civilians. French, British, German, Italians, Russian, South American and American journalists were all over Bulgaria, witnessing and writing about these atrocities. From one end of the world to the other, the news of what the Ottomans were doing spread, and the world united in disgust and condemnation of the Ottomans. Seeing all this, the Russians invaded. And this time, nobody was going to help the Ottomans. This war, the 11th Russo-Turkish War, was an even bigger disaster for the Ottomans than the independence of Greece and all its previous military defeats. In the previous years, the Ottomans had tried to modernize their army, British and American rifles, German artillery, and British ironclad ships. But the Ottomans had not trained their army on how to use modern equipment and still relied on 200-year-old outdated defensive military tactics. They just hunkered down in trenches, hoping the Russians would do suicidal 17th century bayonet charges. Instead, the Russians shelled them into oblivion with modern artillery. The invading Russian army was also welcomed as liberators by the Bulgarians, Romanians, Armenians and Serbs. The British and French only intervened and stopped the Russians when they were only a few miles away from Istanbul. In the resulting peace treaty, the Russians annexed the last remaining Ottoman lands in the northern Caucasus and East Armenia. Romania declared full independence and became a Russian ally. Montenegro declared independence. Serbia doubled in size, declared full independence and became a Russian ally. Bulgaria officially became an autonomous state in the Ottoman Empire, but unofficially was independent and allied with Russia. A mass exodus of Muslims fled these new states in what became one of the world's first recorded refugee crises. In total, 1.5 million who swamped the cities of the empire in slums and squalor. The modernized Ottoman Balkan army had been wiped out. The Ottoman buffer between it and Russia was gone. In any future war, the Russians could now just march right up to Istanbul. And it had also started something else. The Armenians had welcomed the invading Russians in eastern Armenia as liberators, and western Armenia was still in the Ottoman Empire. The Russians now declared themselves to be the protectors of the Armenians in that empire. The Ottomans now looked with ever-deepening suspicions on them. Something started happening.
this is not good.
That would, a few decades down the road, lead to one of the worst crimes of the century. However, the end of that war gave the Ottomans also a brief respite, and it came through another series of events that started during that war, something unexpected that must have seemed almost comedic at the time. During the war, when the Serbs marched south and doubled their land in size, they invaded Greece. The Austrians threatened them into getting out of Greece, but the Serbs started something else with that. The Ottomans still controlled vast patches of Balkan lands, but in these lands, intoxicated by nationalist delusions of grandeur and even race, Serb, Greek, Bulgarian and Albanian nationalists started killing each other before the Ottomans were even gone, so they could have more for themselves once those Ottomans were actually gone. For centuries, these people had lived together in peace and harmony, but with the idea of separation also came the need for new ideas, justifications, and fictions around which to unite a new nation around. In that climate, what separated people became more important than what they had in common, and what differentiated people often was arbitrary. Bosnians are not Turks, but Slavs who converted to Islam centuries ago. So are they Serbs of different faith, as some Serb nationalists claim? Or are they foreign invaders, as other Serb nationalists claim? Or something else entirely? Are Slavs that migrated to northern Macedonia Greeks? Are Orthodox Bulgarians Greeks? Who gets what cultural heritage? Should all Slavs be in one state? Should Greece have what it claims to have had 1,000 years ago? As the Ottoman Empire collapsed in the Balkans, the newly emergent entities started engaging each other in hostility. Serbs against Greeks, against Bulgarians and vice versa, over who the people in the remaining lands were and should be.
And I could promise you this, there will not be any complex treaties or alliances or situations that would cause a global conflict that would be almost a world war. It's a good thing that stuff like that won't happen. And Otto von Bismarck, the Bismarck himself, would never be quoted to say, hey, I don't know what kind of trouble is going to be happening, but there's going to be a war. It's going to somewhere start in the Balkans. I remember that extra credit history lesson video a long time ago.
Be part of. 30 years before the Ottomans had even left those lands. These fights were the forerunners of wars soon to come, but also the harbinger of greater catastrophes to befall the Balkans in the closing years of the 20th century. During the war with Russia, the other European powers met at a conference in Berlin where they divided Africa up amongst themselves, but also secretly divided up the remaining Ottoman lands in Africa without even telling them. The British made Cyprus a full protectorate and occupied Egypt, which was technically still an Ottoman protectorate. The French invaded Tunisia and made it part of their empire. The Ottomans were furious, but there was little to nothing they could do. Within a time period of only 70 years, the once mightiest empire of the hemisphere had shrunken down to a fifth of its former size. A quarter of its population was still Christian, but it had lost almost all it had in Europe besides northern Macedonia, northern Greece, Rumelia, and Crete. All its African vassals were gone, with the exception of Libya, which was basically just a scrap of sand and not worth that much. The Caucasus had slipped away into the hands of Russia, who were by now their biggest threat and right at their doorstep. The Mediterranean was now mostly under British control, and in the remaining Arab lands, the empire had lost much of its legitimacy as an Islamic spiritual leader, as the Arabs increasingly turned away to seek new leaders and solutions. In this mess, a group of idealistic young men would lash out in an attempt to save what was left, but in the end would only bring upon themselves the end of the empire.
Okay, we're going to pause here because chapter 6. Okay, so, all right. Wow. From defeating Byzantium, oh, I can't believe I said that, to controlling the world. I mean, it's one thing to be the top dog, the big dog running the backyard. It's another thing altogether to be, one day realizing that now it's just top dog, everyone's going to be wanting a piece of you. And let's face it, nothing lasts forever. Nothing truly does. That's how the world works. The world is complex, beautiful, insane, and very lovely at the same time. However, this is important. as society pushes forward, things do change, and ideas and technology, science, and look, Kraut, KRAUT, your YouTube channel. This is a really thoroughly put together video, and of course, I like to add in my humorous notes here and there. My one criticism of it is like, if you're going to be showing the Roman Empire falling apart, you should be like, hey, viewer discretion advised, heads up, you're going to see Rome broken or shattered, or you're going to see an RIP Byzantium, RIP Rome. I got to say that it hurt my soul. But the best part of this video was the last will of that czar. Go conquer Constantinople. Get back that city. 10 out of 10. Life-changing statement. Though I don't like the idea of naming it Tsargrad. I mean, come on. Constantinople is just fine. I know I'm not incorrect about this, but this is a great YouTube video. The content creator, please, folks, look, we here at Americans Learn encourage all of you to please, 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 please support the original content creator, because with all this detailed information, fun imagery, animation, facts, all of that, it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy. And the right thing to do, the one thing to do, especially to honor the name of Constantinople, support the original content creator. We're going to continue on with part 3, with chapter 6, of course, and finish it off strong. But never forget the name. Now, your homework assignment is this. Go conquer Constantinople. Get up, boot up, suit up, and get Constantinople back. That's the tall order, the high order of the day. Go do it. You'll make Aurelian proud. Peace.